Hey guys, just finished watching The Flash, Season 4, Episode 16, Run, Iris, Run. Now this episode was an interesting episode, and going into it I was kind of worried about it, that it would seem like very much of a filler episode. And on the surface, it kind of is, but I feel like they're doing this whole season with DeVoe. It's an interesting idea, playing with DeVoe, but we haven't seen DeVoe in like forever now. For a couple of episodes now, we haven't seen him. And it's getting annoying that, this is kind of connected to him. But in this episode, it really is not really connected to it. They find one guy who might be the idea to developing DeVoe, and it might be an interesting idea. But really, at the end of the day, and I don't know. It just was an okay episode. It just kind of wasn't big enough connecting to the overall storyline. It only connected very, very little to the main storyline. I would like to have seen actually DeVoe appear up in here. Maybe Barry and DeVoe going after the same guy at the same time, and then seeing Iris having to go up against DeVoe and how that would go. That would have been interesting to play with that. Maybe Iris is able to get away from him or something. That would have been a way more interesting idea to play with. But we start off with this episode. We see Wells and Cisco are in Star Labs at 1 a.m. still trying to work out, and Wells is kind of just losing it, just going to keep going and going and going, not wanting to stop. Wells wants to make a thinking cap like DeVoe, but Cisco says no. And then Ralph is not happy with that. And what's interesting with Ralph in this episode is that we don't get the Jim Carrey funny Ralph the whole time that everyone's been comparing him to. We kind of just get a more serious version of Ralph, and I kind of like it. I kind of like this version of Ralph. I like having this and seeing both versions of it, and I like doing this as we get closer and closer to all the other metas, and there's more and more, everyone's getting closer and closer, and DeVoe's getting closer and closer to taking on Ralph. I think it's really nice to see that, and seeing Ralph going really down to the dark side and kind of a little kind of dark into it. I think that's really going to be fun to play with that and see him go, a little bit more on the depressed side as he's sees his own mortality coming closer and closer to him. I think that's quite interesting playing with that. Then we get the melting pot, or the melting point, who's a guy who's able to switch powers and stuff at will. We get a cool Spider-Man 2 reference with Cisco, and he referenced it with he's talking to Caitlin about the helmet that the thinking cap that Wells wants to put. Caitlin asks him why he won't help with it, and he says that have you seen Spider-Man 2? Creating evil genius with over trying to technology versus evil genius that doesn't always work and it takes over. I think that was really cool with that. And Iris gets the powers from the guy. She switches the powers, and then Iris ends up having to go stop a fire as the Flash. And it was interesting with that. I don't know why she didn't just put on a version of his suit or a version of Jesse Quick's suit, or why she put on the purple suit, but it was interesting with that. And she wasn't able to take out the fire and stuff. And I don't understand. They knew that Iris was brand new to these powers, very new to these powers. Why didn't Killer Frost just go with him? Why didn't Vibe and Killer Frost go with him? Vibe and Killer Frost have been going everywhere that Flash has been going the past couple of episodes. Every time Flash suits up, Killer Frost and Vibe are always there. I don't know why they were doing that. I mean, when in last week's episode when we had the nuke, Vibe and Killer Frost were both there in the mission. Barry may or may not have needed the help with that. They didn't know what they were getting into, that there was a bomb there, that they were going to need Vibe to be right there so he could help with that, or that they were going to need Killer Frost to try and freeze it going into the last week's episode. They were just all three of them there. Barry probably could have gone there because it was just, when they got the call last week's episode, it was just the Flash going to help Joe and a bunch of arms, and they knew they were moving a nuke, but they didn't know it was going to go off type thing. So they all went in there knowing to help Barry. The three of them all went together. So I don't know why an untrained, unexperienced Iris West with brand new powers, why they sent her out alone all the time. I get the whole idea that she was trying to prove herself and all that, but it didn't make sense that, she has no experience to do this, No one's ever sent anyone without experience going through that. I mean, when you have these guys there, why not? I mean, they're going out to help an experienced Flash just in the last week's episode, so why not go out and help this? Because a lot of this episode could have been dealt with if they just sent out Killer Frost and did that and did her stuff and gave her other things to do. I think that would have been way more interesting to do that and have her play around with that. So I think it would have been cool. I like the way they played with it, and I guess the idea of the way they did it, but I just don't see why Killer Frost wasn't there. And I understand Iris wanted to prove herself, but Killer Frost could have still been there to still help type thing. It would have been a lot more easier. And then so Iris can't make it out of the fire, gets crushed by the beam. Vibe has to go save her. Iris is doing this to try and prove it to herself. Iris goes up against the fire guy again. That was kind of cool. And, she was about to do, I don't know why she didn't just do a tornado and stuff. She said she couldn't get close enough. It doesn't matter how close you are. As long as you're within, you're as close as you can get to him, then goes fast enough, it will put out the fire. But then she makes the cool tidal wave, which kind of puts out, or Wells puts on the thinking cap, which makes him be able to think and figure out that she should make a tidal wave to put out the fire tornado guy. Again, Killer Frost could have just put that out. I don't know why Killer Frost wasn't there in the first place. I mean, if Barry had been there, he would have he probably wouldn't have needed help. He would have just kind of done that at his speed. Still, Killer Frost probably would have went. They would have went, oh, this guy, and he has the fire powers. Let's send Killer Frost. Simplify the whole scenario type thing. I don't know why, or why didn't you just leave with Captain Cold's gun? I'm sure don't they have a version of Captain Cold's gun somewhere in the Iris in Star Labs? She could have been shooting that at high speed type thing. I don't know. And then we get to Melting Point after she defeats the guy with the tidal wave and all that stuff. We get to Melting Point, who ends up taking Iris to speed and giving it back to Barry. And then Melting Point ends up joining the team to help fight DeVoe. And then Wells finds the remaining 2 names at the end of the episode. And Iris starts her new blog again. She just continues the blog about Flash and stuff. And Wells finds out the 2 remaining names for the last 2 metas you have to find, which is Janet Penny and Edward Gauss. Now, I looked up both of them online to see who they were from the comics and stuff, and Janet Penny couldn't find anything other than the Penny Plunder, which was the guy from the 1940s who originally created the giant penny, which was then retconned to be a Two-Face thing. But it was a Bill Finger, Bob Kane character, the Penny Plunderer. But I don't think that's who this character is, especially based on the trailers for next week's episode. It's probably not that character, but that's the only thing I could come up with when it came for Janet Penny. But Edwin Gauss did come up as the Folding Man, which is quite an interesting idea. Reading up about him here. He has the ability to he's a character who was created it was created in 1999, so he's not really that old, but he's not really that new type thing. So he's an interesting character. He's able to kind of move around and fold time and space type thing. He has all kinds of powers where he's able to do all kinds of stuff, and he has technology suit, and he has more physic powers. He kind of reminds me a bit of who's able to he's able to travel between dimensions type thing. So that sounds cool. Sounds a lot like Cloak from Cloak and Dagger over on the Marvel side there. So that could be a cool thing to play with, and it'll be interesting to play with him as things move on here. But all in all, this episode was kind of interesting. But like I said, it just didn't make sense to not have Killer Frost there, and there was no, I don't know. It just there could have been other ways to do that, and other ways to explain why Killer Frost didn't just go out. And I understand, Caitlin is not, doesn't always want to let this out, but she's been saying in the last few episodes that, she started to remember what Killer Frost is doing. So when she want to play with that more and practice that more and see how that would play out. So all in all, this episode was an okay episode. It was a fun episode. Was fun seeing her dealing with powers, but it's just kind of predictable to the point where there's no way that, it was obvious that she was going to, lose the powers and Barry's going to get his powers at the end of this episode. So there's very little in this episode that connects it to the overall season storyline, and that's what bothers me with this episode, is that it didn't connect enough to it for me. And having that one guy there, yeah, cool idea, but it just didn't really connect it enough to doing this. I mean, seeing Iris get her powers and stuff, it was an interesting idea, but you go into it knowing that it's not going to last. It's just going to be a one-time fluke. It's a filler thing type thing, and it's okay. It's just it was just knowing that it wasn't going to last was kind of the whole boring part. It doesn't matter because it's not going to last type thing. You don't have to pay attention to it. It's not going anywhere type thing. It's not going to finish off and stuff. So all in all, it was an interesting episode. I would have liked to have seen maybe Iris do some other stuff with the powers, and stop every time she kind of went into the fight. She kind of, I don't believe in myself, I can do this, instead of if she had been going out to fight people with the Elongated Man, with Vibe, with Killer Frost, and them wanting to take over the whole thing since they have more experience than she does, and her being like, no, I got this, instead of her always going into the fight and just being like, oh no, I don't know what to do, and help me, crying help all the time. That's all she kept on saying I'm sure she said, help guys, I can't do this, giving up so many times. It really just didn't really make her, it just made her seem very weak going into this, rather than just having, if all three of them, if Iris, Cisco, and Caitlin Snow went all out there, and Iris and Caitlin and Cisco try to take over, try to take lead when they're out there, but Iris being like, no, I got this. I think that would have made way more stuff. Maybe they didn't believe in her, and then her proving herself, I think that would have been a better idea than her running into the situations always screaming, help me, I can't do this, I don't know what I'm doing. Clearly, on no skill involved, no practice with this. So other than that, it was an okay episode, but just kind of annoying with the Iris stuff in here. But it was fun seeing her playing with the powers. It's just kind of obvious that we were not gonna, Barry's gonna have his powers back by the end of this episode. So next week's episode kind of looks interesting, but it still looks like another one of those filler episodes. They have a way of doing these filler episodes with the seasons that are kind of like, okay, they're just filler episodes, but they barely connect to, because it's another meta that DeVoe wants. How is he going to use this? The next episode character is something to do with like gravity. She's going to make people float helium. Like, what the hell is DeVoe going to do with that power? Other powers are interesting with the luck power, I think DeVoe could use that in an interesting idea. But some of these powers on their own, they're just kind of boring type thing and just kind of cheesy and childish powers. So I'd like to see more sophisticated powers with these metas rather than kind of these silly powers. And if you're going to take these silly powers, take the characters from the comics and stuff. I know the Lady Luck was, but so we'll have to wait and see who this character is. Because a silly character like that, then take the character from the comic and give the character from the comic their costume, their everything, and go all out. Or instead of doing the mixture of both, it's kind of be cool to go a little bit more serious with some of these powers rather than it's just a little too silly with this. So let me know what you think, guys, about this episode in the comments below. Season 4, episode 16 of The Flash, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.
I'm Captain America, here to talk to you about one of the most valuable traits a soldier or student can have.
Subscribing.
Sometimes subscribing is the key to victory. Sometimes it leads to very little, and it seems like it's not worth it. And you wonder why you waited so long for something so disappointing. How many more of these?
You're still here.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, guys. Peace.
It's over.